Good stewards will certainly have happy Sabbath. Just about every week, I receive from quite a number of my friends, subscribers, followers, this little message: have a happy Sabbath. So I'm greatly moved by such. I appreciate it very much. But then something within me reach out to find out, how can we have happy Sabbath? There must be a formula. There must be something to build up that happiness, something registering within your being to say, yes, I'm happy with this Sabbath business. Happy Sabbath. What is happiness? Happiness, in my reckoning, my observation, is that finding material, intellectual, social, spiritual, and physical fulfillment. And when there is that fulfillment, it triggers something within you to say, yes, I'm there, I'm with it, I'm in line, I'm growing, I'm developing, I'm finding satisfaction. Happy Sabbath, everyone. How do we find happiness in our Sabbath worship? The thing for us to do is to look at Scripture and try to understand what Scripture is saying. First and foremost, there must be 6 days, or let's say days, of creative production for one to have happy Sabbath. When you go to Genesis chapters 1 and 2, you discover that the Lord had gone through performing, pronouncing good, performing, pronouncing good, performing, pronouncing very good. And then he instituted the Sabbath. And if that is not satisfying, then you jump over to Exodus chapter 20. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you must labor and do all your work. Then you can enter into a real Sabbath rest. You may ask, well, what if the person is not employed, out of job? Then you should spend the portion of week allotted to find something to do. Once upon a time when I was out of job, it was like I was more employed than others who had jobs. I spent time writing letters. I spent time going to different places, meeting this interview, meeting that interview. So when my Sabbath arrived, no, let me rephrase that. When the Sabbath arrived, I was able to enter into that restful experience. Even if you're a cripple, there can be that active, creative energy moving through your being. So we're following Scripture. There must be labor, then Sabbath rest. When it comes to Sabbath rest, there must be that God awareness, God consciousness. Remember that He is Creator and Sustainer and Redeemer. Now, when you look at Creator and you begin to remind yourself of the God in creation, He's omnipotent, He's omnipresent, He's omniscient, He's holy, He's loving, He's just and merciful. You begin to enter into that restfulness, like the psalmist would say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He allows me to be laying down in green pastures. You're talking about a God who is able, a God who is not dependent on his creative work. So no, you're not depending on the creative works, you're depending on the God who created the things for the human family or for all living things. So there must be that God awareness for one to really have a happy Sabbath. Then we must begin to realize that it is a time to bring the universe together. What did the Exodus passage say? Your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your cattle, even the stranger that is within your gate. What is that suggesting? That's a mini form of a universal togetherness. On that given day, the universe should be drawn together with the one who instituted the Sabbath rest, the one who decided that that is the day for meeting. And by the way, we must remind ourselves that what is happening is that the persons are coming together to meet the person on that day. The day is not a person. The Sabbath is not a person. The Sabbath is a day. The Sabbath is a day when you come together to acknowledge the person of the universe and to acknowledge the rest of creation. So in that mini form, in the family setting, we are reminding ourselves of what the universe ought to be like. And when you go through scriptures, you discover that one of the great problems that the Israelites face, and we would say others face, was the breaking of the Sabbath. And up to today, one of the problems we're facing is a misunderstanding of true Sabbath worship. When you come to talk about Sabbath worship, it's not what you feel, it's not what you think, it's not what you reason out, it's not what you would like. It's a day when we acknowledge that there is a God, God of the universe, and that God is careful about the natural material world. And so we're there. All of that, when pulled together, elicit that worshipfulness. You have some people begin to think that when you talk about Sabbath worship, your legalism is in the picture. Yes, there will be for some sort of legalism. You read the Gospels carefully, you discover that some people had entered into that legalism. Again, that is to misinterpret and to spoil that which is to be of great blessing to the human family. Read Isaiah 58 and you get that meaning. He said, if you can take your foot from the Sabbath, if you can refrain from doing what you find that personal pleasure in, in what it's actually saying to us, the focus is on the Almighty. The reaching out is to the Almighty. What it's talking about, in submissiveness, we begin to experience the presence and power of the Almighty. And when we feel the presence and power of the Almighty, we're sharing it with those around us. You don't have to go out and load mouth or even preaching. Yes, preaching should help us, but that's the main thing. It's living. And that is what Jesus was trying to get those around him to understand in the New Testament. When it comes to the Sabbath day, there was the crippled man, could not move about. He was physically challenged. And because he's physically challenged, it was limiting his meaningfulness to life. It was limiting his fellowship. And so the master said, spend time, release him. You will be able to have a happy Sabbath then, because he is having a happy Sabbath. He was not talking about abolishing the Sabbath. He was not talking about forgetting Sabbath worship. He was intensifying the meaning of Sabbath worship. He was allowing them to understand that on that given day, they would be meeting the Master of the universe. That's the time he chose to meet with them. That the time is set apart. That the time is sanctified. Sanctified because he would be present like Moses out there on the mountain. The Master said, take off your shoes because the ground on which you stand is holy. Because God is present there at that moment. So when you go through the scriptures, you discover that Sabbath observance was elevated to a point it was not identified with God to say Sabbath, God equal. No, it was talking about the mighty master of the universe setting apart a time when his children, those who believe in him, those who choose to respect creation, they would meet together. They would meet together. The creatures would be reminded of something outstanding, and that reminder would elicit that worshipfulness that would lift them out of themselves and, as it were, place them in the presence of the Almighty. It is not just to say you go to church It is not just to be around sanctified place. No, it is much more than that. It is meeting the divine and blending in with the divine. That's what Sabbath worship is about. You're lifted out of the ordinary sphere. And by the way, let's remind ourselves that it is also putting emphasis and creative activity. Yes. When you read the Isaiah passage, in Isaiah 58, it tells you that if you enter into that proper, meaningful Sabbath observance, your blessings will be plentiful. And let me tell you something, it was talking about material blessings. It was talking about intellectual blessings. It was talking about social blessings. It was talking about spiritual blessings. And it was talking about physical blessings. Therefore, to have a happy Sabbath, there must be a certain amount of the development, not just a futuristic, yes, you will be, but you ought to now. Fellow stewards, fellow Sabbath observers, have a very happy Sabbath. Experience the blessings of the Almighty and share it with somebody. Thank you for watching. And if you're so inclined, please subscribe.